Well, actually, I have to say I'm not an open water expert, so I'm not really going to speak to open water issues. I'm more of an administrator and a manager. And I'd say that all of the things that are in the guidelines that are printed are relevant. So I wouldn't pick out any individual thing that I would say this is particularly for people. What I'm more interested in as the open water chair is how you disseminate this information down to the lower levels and the people who are actually running the events. Because rules and regulations and guidelines don't make your open water event safe. It's the people that implement them, and as Chris said, doing it right. And posting things on the internet like the videos for this conference and guidelines, that's good, but that isn't really enough. We have to, in a more proactive way, bring the information down to, for masters, the local master swimming committee, people who are administrators of our events, and then the event directors, so that they can implement it and we can have safe events. And so, just so everybody knows, we've been actually talking about this in my committee since last July, and we're going to be asking for budget money to do this education, because educating people isn't cheap. And so the NGBs have to commit to actually funding this education, or it's not really going to happen.
Thank you very much. Shelly, you know, the next question is for you. You know how hard pro marathon swimmers push themselves in cold water, rough water, warm water, you name it. And you also know how hard amateur swimmers push themselves. And something that Ralph Godo alluded to, what do you recommend that the athletes themselves do to prepare for all the conditions that they can face?
That's a really interesting question, having just coached 40 athletes swim 20 kilometres in the Rottnest Channel Swim in Western Australia, my hometown of Perth. And, you know, at the start, you know, I'm letting them pick my brains for 4 months, and I'm helping them understand all the aspects, where it's the mental preparation, the physical preparation, the nutritional preparation, the respect of human nature and also Mother Nature. And I think it's very difficult because, as I was saying, the skill level is going down in the participation of open water swimming events. So I think there is no room for error. You've got to let them know the full story. You've got to let them know all the aspects. You can't leave any stone unturned. Otherwise, you are going to be where we are right now and having the tragic loss of an athlete. So I think that as a coach, as an administrator, I think our responsibility is to educate on all levels, whether professional or amateur, and help them understand that at the end of the day, they are a human being. Things do go wrong to the human body, and to have respect of self more than anything else.
Thank you very much, Shelly. John, the next question is to you. You're not only you were Olympic coach, but your roots go very deep into age group swimming. And therefore, you're introducing open water swimming to young kids. You do a great thing on Wednesdays up in Santa Barbara, where you're from. And what are some of the things you teach? And then there was also something you just told me a few days ago. It's very interesting. How quickly can new policies and procedures actually be implemented?
The guidelines don't exist, and I don't know, I can't be let down more by that or inspired by that, and something that Shelly said earlier about the window that we have. I had to invent my own guidelines, and that's not a safe situation. Not out of lack of self-confidence, but out of these kids' lives are in my hands. They follow what I say more than what their parents say, and that's a scary position to be in. That's scary enough at the pool, where you really can see almost everything happening. But out there, beyond the sand, we don't have guidelines. And I've been lucky, because I am introducing an open water component to my swimming team. But what I've invented in the short term is that I don't let anybody be involved in that under the age of 13. That's my guideline. I don't know if it's a good one or not. they also have to have 2 summers of being in the junior guards program in Santa Barbara, because they're getting in that more than I know. I'm learning from them when we sit on the beach on Wednesday afternoons and talk about all the things that could happen when they're out there. So I'm in a state of learning and passing on that kind of knowledge to my young swimmers. And hopefully we're going to build something as a coach that competitively can't be stopped. And that's a winning tradition. That's my expertise. I want to win. I want my kids to win. I also know that parents are charging me with their kids' success from the parents' standpoint, and they're starting to learn through everything that's finally coming out, good, bad, and otherwise, that they're actually charging me with their kids' lives for that 45 minutes on that Wednesday afternoon, when we're only doing fast approaches and getting through the surf and then sprinting right back. That's all the further we've ever gone actually in the water in the first summer. These kids are doing lifeguard competitions, and they're certainly swimming further than that. I schedule it on Wednesdays because we have a swim and run that's very organized in Santa Barbara every Wednesday. And they go and do that, and I'm sorry to all the master swimmers. It used to be exciting for the master swimmers to see that age group team show up, but we keep winning all the races, and now when they see us, everybody's kind of rough, pushing their feathers out like proud peacocks, standing in their little bus tubs full of warm water to keep their toes warm. And my kids come out there in their regular suits and win. We're not as welcome as we used to be at the races, which I love. On the speed at which rules could be changed, without being too hard on all the different processes and all the different governing bodies and everybody who sits in the rooms and makes the rules, I think right now, if you put a Post-it note on a snail and send it towards a governing body, the snail might get there, the Post-it note might be on its back when it gets there. That's wrong too. And some things have to happen fast. One great thing that has happened, and it happened the week after we lost Fran, was I have a close friend who's involved with International Paralympic, and she had a letter to their organization within a week, and they already have in writing a top end and bottom end temperature. It's a start. It's nothing. It's a start. It's still a guideline. It still says in that rule, should. But it's a step. And even if it's a wrong step, it's a step forward to put something in somebody's head at a race that has a high-end temperature. And that's just one minor aspect, as you talked about from the Lifeguarding Association, that's a symptom that's just going to be treated. It's not necessarily going after the disease. So it doesn't have to be a slow process. It doesn't have to be wait for this group to decide something, wait for that group to decide something, which is funny for me to say because I just got put on the next group that's going to decide some stuff. I'll probably be a thorn in that room, but that's okay. We need thorns too. So, thanks.
Thank you, David. David, there are rules that are in rule books, and then there's what everybody's been talking about, the practical rules of Mother Nature. And you're up here in the Bay or Northern California area, and what are some advices that you would give to coaches, parents, athletes as they head to the shoreline, head to the Bay Area, the rivers, and everything else that you're actually responsible for up at Sonoma County?
Thank you. I'd just like to say it's an honor to be here also. We made some really big progress at our Pacific Masters meeting where we actually brought up the topic of safety. And for a long time, as a career lifeguard, as a coach, as a swimmer, I've been on all sides of this. And so it's really exciting to be a part of this, so thank you. I think most of these aspects have already been touched by Ralph and by Shelly, educating our swimmers through coaches, through parents. And then I think the biggest thing we need to be able to do is to say don't swim, call it. We don't need to do this today. We've had situations where people are sitting there and they are in their Speedos or they're in their tri-suits and they're shivering and they're not ready to do a 2-mile swim. But you know, they're coaching, and we've all been on this side of it too, where as a coach, we want our swimmers to do well. We want them to go for it. You know, you can do it. Of course you can. But when they've only been swimming for a week and this is their first open water swim, it's probably not the best time to do the rough water in La Jolla. So know the environment that you're getting into. The gentleman in the back talked about bacteria. We deal with some swimmer's itch too. If you don't like swimmer's itch, you might not want to swim in some of our waters. You know, make sure that they're aware of their comfort and experience level, and as a parent and as a coach, make sure you're really wrapping your mind around what are the experiences and what is the level of comfort that your swimmers have in the water. Are they comfortable enough to swim a 2-mile, or should they start off with a 500? Do they need those points that bad, or can they just go and have some fun and get some experience, good experience, to where they're going to come back and actually compete? The last thing I guess I'd say is, you know, we need to teach people about the emergency action plan. As Lieutenant Buchanan talked about over here, in life-saving service, we always have one. I mean, we won't put on a swim unless we have an emergency action plan of how we're going to dive, how we're going to rescue this person, what to do if. As swimmers and as athletes, I think we need to start making our own action plan. What am I going to do if I get a cramp? Where am I going to get out of the water? What am I going to do? How am I going to signal for help? And then it's our responsibility as race coordinators and safety coordinators to let them get that information, to put it in places where they're going to get it. So if it's your race director telling them how they're supposed to, where they can get out, how they can signal lifeguard help, that's great. But we should also put it on a board, put the water temp, all these aspects that we can give to them and teach them how to take care of themselves. So yeah, with that, I think it's, we need to teach people how to take their own safety upon themselves. And with that, I'll go.
Marcia, you are a swimmer. You were committee chairperson. You've written a very beautifully crafted book. And now I'm going to ask you a really difficult question. Thinking out loud, what are some rules that we may brainstorm about, that we need to think about for not only master swimming, age group swimming, and everything else that you may not see currently in the rule books?
Thank you, Steve. When I first started in the long distance committee in the mid-1990s, there was about 3 lines written on safety, and now we've got several items in the rule book now. And what that has really been based on, basing on what David and John have said as well, is its experience and its helping people and educating them where they are. Our safety standards are, if you have a rule book, it's in 303.1, and as working with Long Distance Committee and the Open Water Committee, this is a fluid document. And I say that because it's always changing and there's always new experiences that people from sea to shining sea are going to be experiencing that need to be incorporated, because that just makes our whole organization better. Also, when I first started with the Long Distance Committee, Sally Dillon was the chair, and she put together the evaluation process for race directors. It was not meant to be an intimidating document, but rather it was meant to be a document that would help race directors. And Peter Crumbine followed me as the open water, or he followed Sally and then I followed him. And we just continue to refine it. And it's really important to continue to refine these documents all the time. There's also in the race contracts, again, that's not meant to be an intimidating document, but it's meant to help race directors develop a checklist of what they need to do with the rules and all. And I would say with, educating and with the rules that are coming up in the future that none of us can certainly anticipate at this point, it's going to be developing checklists. But also with open water swimming, there's always that level of flexibility that needs to be incorporated, because we all might have expected it was going to be a sunny day in San Francisco, and it's not today. And sometimes race directors and kind of very experienced open water swimmers will get to races and things happen. Things happen in the middle of races, and that's when the educated personnel, whether it's going to be on a safety level or it's going to be on a swimmer experience level or it's going to be on the race director of somebody watching from overseas or from the land, are going to be needing to have those policies rather than really firm rules. There you go. Thank you.
This next question is to Lynn. This is sponsored by USMS, but there's actually people from 8 different countries here. Where do people go to find information that you put online? With the internet, that opens up a lot. How can we as a global community get more information from where USMS puts it online?
US Masters now, we have 2 places where things are published. One's in the rule book, which is online, and as well as published in print. And the other one is our guide to operations. And we do have a long distance and open water section there.
And this next question is to Shelly. Lynn is administering something that's in the United States where there's a common language. It might be not common cultures, but Shelly, you sit at FINA, where there's 202 national federations. How in the world do you coordinate 202 national federations to come up with a single unified set of rules or procedures or policies that are not only agreed upon, but actually followed upon? Isn't that extremely difficult?
Well, unfortunately, the sad fact is that it's not just difficult, we've failed. And that sits with me, does not sit with me well. The fact that the gentleman that talked about water quality before, you know, going to certain cultures, there's not a uniform water quality stock standard that is respected worldwide. The swimmers that swam with me know that every time I swam in Argentina, I was the litmus test because I got sick. So, and I'm not joking, you know, for 5 years in a row, I got sick and the athletes were waiting to see if I got ill, would they get ill? So, and that determined what the water quality was like. So I think, and I'm being quite serious here. So in this day and age when FINA's, our governing body now, is overseeing our sport, has much changed in that area? Well, you can tell it hasn't. There's swimmers swimming in some races that are on the World Cup where, you know, we write reports from delegates and change hasn't happened. And it's, you know, that I feel once again we're failing. The thing that bothers me, if there is not a rule, well, why don't you, if you feel it's important enough for your athletes in your event, why don't you introduce a rule? Take the initiative. If you care enough about your athletes and your athletes' safety, for example, water quality, and you know the water quality standards in your area, utilise that. Don't let FINA be the governing body of your event if you feel there's a rule. That's my personal opinion, not my hat as a FINA committee member right now. But it has been very difficult because you've got to respect cultures, but at the same time enforce rules. And once again, I've been a thorn in many organisers' butts. But that's one of the things I'm proudest of, is I continue to be a thorn because I will not lower my standards and leave athletes at risk.
Thank you. John, thinking positively, thinking in the future, there's local organizations, there's USMS, there's USA Swimming, there's FINA, there's British Swimming, there's Australian Swimming. How is we as a global community just come together and communicate, agree upon, even debate? What are the best steps?
Third party. We are inherently control freaks. As a coach, you don't know as much as I know. And I live by that. But that's a confidence that I have to exude to my athletes or they won't believe in me. Unfortunately, that strength is my weakness when I go to a board meeting, when I go to a Southern California Swimming Board meeting, when I sit in on other board meetings. It's that letting go that maybe I don't know everything. That's the toughest step for a control freak to take. I feel like I'm in a meeting now. Hi, I'm John Dussliere, and I'm a control freak. Hi, John. But I am, and I think that's why I'm successful as a coach, because all the variables are thought of. And they're easy in that rectangular pool in comparison. How do the different organizations work together? Third party, new blood, but not a changeover, just an injection of. Because that experience that we all have that have always been in swimming will be just as valuable to who we need to listen to as the value of their information to bring to us. And I think that we're too close-minded for our own good.
Thank you. David, this question is to you. Since we have heard about lifeguards from Sonoma to Waikiki to San Diego, et cetera, how do the different chapters in the U.S. Life Saving Association work together? We as a swimming community may be a little bit disjointed, but it seems when I hear Chris and Greg and Ralph and you, it seems that you're one coordinated whole. How did you formulate that community?
Since the president's here, I'll say we do it very cohesively and incredibly well. I've only been I've been in the USLA for about 10 years, since I started lifeguarding as a college kid down in Santa Barbara. And I've recently been involved in the board meetings. And I know honestly, I think Mr. Brewster would handle this question far better than me, in that I've only seen the last 5 years in that terms. However, if I'm going to talk about it, I guess, in those 5 years, it really is, we treat each other as teammates. It's much like this meeting right here. We come together twice a year at annual board meetings, and while the motions are very important, the board meeting is very important. It's meeting your fellow lifeguards, meeting those administrators that are doing similar, if not innovative things in their own chapters and agencies. And I think it's a very similar system to this. If, as John just said, a lot of things that we do in the USLA, and correct me if I'm wrong, Mr. Brewster, but start at the chapter and at the regional level. Somebody has an idea. They try it out if it's within our laws, bylaws, and then it gets brought up to the national level, and then we can disseminate that and choose to use parts or the whole. So I think it's, I think it's what this group is becoming and working at right now, to really attempt to find a problem, see that problem, and then fulfill a solution, if not a full solution, at least attempt a solution. So I guess that's about it.
Thank you. And last question before we open up to questions. Marcia, you've been on the long distance committee for many years, and you have people from Maine and Vermont over there, and you have people from California and Oregon here. People dealing with cold water in the Pacific and the warm Gulf waters. And they all have, as David said, their little pockets of expertise. You as a national committee chairperson, how do you collect it all? What's the best way to collect that information and disseminate it to all the other chapters around the United States?
Thank you. I think one of the main things is to develop open lines of communication. And when I was the long distance chair, I think I made pretty good inroads there. But also to have firm standards in the planning and the sanctioning process, and allowing people who are interested to draw upon those and let them know through the educational process or just sheer dumb luck that they have this place that they could go to for a resource. This swimmer resource also, to be able to ask questions, whether it's, what do I do when I was shaking because the water was cold, just to let people know that there was a chat site for that. Well, the English Channel group has been very successful with their chat site, and maybe that's something that USMS wants to expand past just the discussion forum. Maybe it could be something like a open water safety Q&A area where people can just pipe in as necessary. I also think that the race directors continue to need to communicate with one another. And when I was long distance chair, I was very much, not so much hand-holding, but just asking them tough questions. And when there'd be a race, and a race director is totally exhausted when it's over. I mean, they've just swum 800 races, and I know that feeling. I would often ask them, okay, what went right? Because they can't think of that at this point. And I said, well, for starters, everybody who went into the water came out. That's our top 10 reasons in doing this. You know, and then they would say, well, the bagels were late, and, you know, there wasn't enough mustard for the hot dogs and things like that. But that's the number one priority all the time. And when I guess I made sort of a promise to myself when I was starting to swim with a lot of inexperienced open water swimmers that I was not going to become the Rob Hall of open water swimming. So that's just something that rings in my mind. And when people do things that are unsafe, I think us as open water swimming, you know, experts or whatever we call ourselves here, need to stand up to the plate and give people a serious talking to when they do stupid stuff like swim out into the fog. Or somebody last summer, I watched them swim 1,000 yards out into Lake Michigan by himself and back, and I watched 3 speedboats go by between him and the shore. I mean, it was just stupid. So we need to collectively say, we're going to stand up and tell somebody, that was foolish what you did, and you could have cost yourself, paid the ultimate price there. I think also another thing is that the flexibility that has to happen. We can have these firm standards, but things happen in open water that do not happen in that 8 lanes, 50 meters, lines on the bottom. Stuff happens, and you have to be able to anticipate those changes. And then, you know, with our growing interest in triathletes joining us in races and all, we need to, we're widening the ability net, but we need to safely incorporate these people. You know, allowing wetsuits into races and having the category 1 and having category 2 and neoprene caps. Well, this is all allows people to do it more, or more people to do it, but do we, in that sense, slide our scales down to people who wouldn't have at all been able to do it? Now they're on the fringe. And that's a real shady area, because you don't want to tell people that they can't do it, but you want to make sure that everybody is safe, and that's always going to be the top 10 reasons why we're here. You know, and I think also with the minimum and the maximum water temperatures, because nobody wants to go in when it's 60 degrees, but actually most people can handle that, even though they don't think they can handle it. But if it's 55, I mean, as Chris was alluding to, I've watched Lake Michigan drop 10 degrees in 6 hours. It went from 70 to 60 in 6 hours, and it was just amazing, you know. And I think also with our population in general, we have to figure out a way to incorporate disabilities. Like, what happens when somebody has an actual disability, like maybe they can't turn their head to breathe and they use a snorkel? That's something that is coming down the path, and also geriatric issues that are coming up. What happens when somebody does not present as an Alzheimer's patient, but all of a sudden they're in your race? What do? You know, these are some rules that are going to be confronting us. Or someone has a seizure with, obviously you would have medical personnel on this, but you know, people who look like they are fine with body and mind, and then you get in there and they have cognitive issues that you can never anticipate until it's being written up in some medical report later. So I think also with the anticipating the rules with some of these longer races that we're having, you know, you have 25K and things like that. Should there be a medical form that you have to fill out that says, I went to the doctor in this time period and the doctor said I was okay? You know, where are the parameters for that? And I'm not sure that an age limit or minimum or maximum is fair, because The 40-year-old might have the high blood pressure and the enlarged heart that nobody knew about, and this 70-year-old is really fit and healthy. And, you know, so I think we just have to standardize this for everybody, but have a lot of flexibility built into it. And that comes with experience, too. Thank you.
Thank you very much. What we may do, unless there's a burning question or two, we'll break for 15 minutes, and then we'll come back for a very interesting panel discussion on emergencies and contingencies. So if you have a burning question? Okay, we have a burning question. We'll have the emergencies and contingencies, then we'll have a little raffle to get you some free stuff, and then we'll break for lunch. So burning question.
I have lots of wrinkles, but there are a few people in the room that have a few more. So I'll that's my mentor speaking. Everybody's skirting around on the panel, and this is not to impugn anyone, but there's an elephant in this room that nobody's addressing. If we don't take control of this in our little window of opportunity, how many lawyers do we have in this room? You know what I'm going to say next. The lawyers are going to take control, and we will lose it. That's my burning statement. So let's not let the lawyers run this through lawsuits. Enough said?
I just want to add to what David was explaining. You asked a question which was, how did we come up with these the standards we use, and how do we interact? And I just want to give you a very thumbnail history, which is that lifeguarding, life-saving organizations in the United States evolved locally, and they all had their own standards, every single one of them. So Los Angeles County is sure they're the best, and Newport Beach is sure they're the best, and Atlantic City is sure they're the best, and they're all doing it a little bit differently. Well, it can't all be the best. It can't all be right, right? And I think, from what I'm sensing, that you're in the same situation, that there are event directors all around the country who are doing it, and if anybody asks them, they'd say, this is the best, I'm telling you right here. We couldn't force local municipalities, lifeguard agencies, to do it a particular way. Clearly, I mean, they run their show. What we did was we got a bunch of lifeguards together around the country from all of our different chapters, and we came up with a set of best practices that we agreed with. And it took a long time to get to that point, but we came up with a set of best practices, and we now offer to certify, essentially accredit, lifeguard agencies who meet those minimum standards that we came up with. And we charge this really small amount to do this, and at first they were still saying, well, what do we have to be certified for? But now, over 100 agencies across the country, lifeguard agencies like Los Angeles County, like San Diego, like Atlantic City's, like Miami Beach, well, they're still rowing boats there, but anyhow, like Miami Beach, like Fort Lauderdale, whatever, are USLA certified. We created a value to this, and it's not exactly a stamp of approval, but it's saying we agree to this minimum standard. So what I'm getting at in terms of the conundrum you have here of whether the Post-it note makes it on the snail to wherever it was supposed to go, and whether or not USA Swimming is going to step up, and I have no idea, is that in absence of that leadership, lead.